The Black Rose McQueen. I wanted to give a shout out to Ring IQ Boxing, and remember to tune in to the motherfucking relay.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, Eddy Reynoso had this to say. He says he has interest in training Eddy Ruiz. Former unified world heavyweight champion Eddy Ruiz is still looking for a coach after abruptly ending his relationship with coach Manny Robles. And some sources have revealed that one option could be Eddy Reynoso, who in 2019 was recognized as Trainer of the Year. Reynoso said a few days ago that he would not rule out that possibility. Yes, of course. We are for that, to work with Ruiz as long as there is discipline, that there is order in his training, said the renowned coach to ESPN Deportes. Reynoso's stable is growing as he's the head coach of Canelo Alvarez, Oscar Valdez, Ryan Garcia, Luis Neri, and Frank Sanchez. We are ready to work with any fighter, and we will see what happens. It would be an honor to also work with the first heavyweight champion that Mexico produced, added Reynoso, who is currently in Guadalajara accompanying his family after breaking the camp that he kept with several fighters in San Diego, specifically with Canelo, Neri, and Valdez. Ruiz has been looking for a coach, and a few weeks ago it was reported that Teddy Atlas would be an option. However, it seems that there was no agreement, and according to sources with knowledge of the matter, they have already been rapprochements between the two camps. You know, perhaps Eddy Reynoso could be a good fit for Eddy Ruiz because he's accustomed to dealing with a mid-range to inside counterpuncher who's very astute defensively, and in that way, Eddy Ruiz bears some of those qualities. That mid-range to inside, he's also very good in the pocket. He's got good counterpunching. He's got a solid chin, takes a great shot. It's true. And in that way, perhaps Eddy Reynoso can help him sharpen and fine-tune what building blocks he has already, perhaps. But it really isn't a lock. It's not a guarantee. Because where I see development and improvement in a Ryan Garcia, for example, who's also training under Eddy Reynoso, the same cannot be said of an Oscar Valdez. You know, Oscar Valdez in that Adam Lopez fight, he still looked to be a guy that has some defensive holes that he needs to work on, that he's taking far too much punishment, the kind of punishment that can take years off of your professional career. Essentially, a trainer is not a one-size-fits-all solution. And for a guy like Eddy, is his issue a coaching issue, a training issue, or a ticker issue? Because I happen to think Manny's not a bad trainer. I mean,
He's all right.
he was in Andy's corner when he became a unified champion, wasn't he? He helped him get to that point, so how bad could he be? That if there was a problem there, the problem wasn't Manny, the problem was Eddy. And you can swap out Manny for somebody else. You can swap out Manny for Teddy, or you can swap out Manny for Eddy. You can swap him out. But the problem is still going to be there. And the problem was Eddy, his ticker problem, not Manny. I mean, Manny Robles, Teddy Atlas, or Eddy Reynoso, they can know what to do to sharpen a guy up. They can know what
They need to work on.
areas they need to focus on, what holes they need to patch up. They can come up with the proper game plan to deal with a fighter. But all of that means nothing if Eddy Ruiz, Eddy the fighter, is not focused, is not dedicated. And that was the problem, that Eddy wasn't listening to Manny, and he wasn't listening to his father. He just wanted to do what he wanted to do. And whether you put him in there with Eddy or you put him in there with Teddy, the same applies. It's up to Eddy to put in the work, because they can't put in the work for you. The impact that the trainer has on the fighter, however big or small, it doesn't really even come into it until the fighter is ready to work, until the fighter is ready to receive instruction. And once those instructions are received, then we can assess how good or bad those instructions were. But I reiterate, that doesn't come into it until the fighter's ready to work. And with Eddy, that's the problem.
Yeah.
At least that was the problem. Who knows if he's gotten himself in a better headspace than he was a couple of months ago. We don't know. It's a funny thing. It's a very funny thing. Because I actually view Buddy McGirt as being pivotal to Sergey having gotten his belt back.
The right man for the job.
That the trainer had a positive effect on the fighter, and you can see that.
When it comes to Buddy.
Might even go as far as attributing the fighter's success to who he had in his corner. But it's a funny thing because at the same time, when a fighter's not listening to his trainer, that's not the trainer's fault. Lest we forget, You know, before Buddy McGirt was in Sergey Kovalev's corner, it was John David Jackson in Sergey Kovalev's corner for the longest time. And we all know they had a tumultuous relationship. Those guys often didn't see eye to eye, and the story was that Sergey didn't respect his trainer. See, when the fighter is succeeding, when he's adhering to the instruction of his coach, then we can assess that coach's value, how good or bad he is. But when the fighter's not listening at all, well, we can't put that on the coach. That's not the coach's fault, because if you're not listening, the coach doesn't even come into it. And maybe you might listen to one guy more than you do another guy, but if you go out there and you get your fucking ass kicked, is it really the coach's fault, or is it your fault? Sergey Kovalev had some very bad habits. I'm sure you're all aware of them by now. You know, Sergey, he likes the drink. It is what it is. And he had a reputation for being a guy who goes as far as drinking vodka, things like that, during a camp. You look at these bad habits, these practices, and you have to ask, does this reflect poorly on the trainer? Is this the trainer's fault? Or is this Sergey's fault? Because Sergey's not a little boy, you know? You're a professional athlete. It's up to you to behave like a professional athlete. I mean, we can gauge the value of the coach's instructions as to whether or not they were good instructions. But those instructions don't even come into it when you're not adhering to instruction, that you're not even listening to your corner. You're not even listening to your trainer because for some reason, for one reason or another, you don't respect him. Which point, it's not even about the trainer anymore and whether or not he's a good trainer. You're not a good student. You could go as far as having an astrophysicist, the best astrophysicist, or one of them. You could go as far as having Neil deGrasse Tyson, somebody like that, teaching a class on astrophysics. Right? It's not a question of his area of expertise or his ability to understand and communicate this kind of information to an individual, to a classroom, as he's the expert. And it is up to the student to absorb that information, to receive it. But if that student so decides to not absorb that information, to not listen, that doesn't make a Neil deGrasse Tyson, for example, any less of an expert in his field. No, he's still the expert. He still retains his value, and it is the student that is missing out. And in that way,
you can swap him out.
You can put Andy in there with a Teddy Atlas. You can put Andy in there with a Eddy Reynoso. It's still up to him to adhere to instruction. It's still up to him to listen. And the value of the trainer, that trainer's expertise, that trainer's ability to help shape a fighter and get him fighting fit, that trainer's value is not lessened due to Andy Ruiz's
bad habits,
ticker problem, because that's what he's got. He's got a ticker problem. You just beat Anthony Joshua and spectacular fans in your own backyard where nobody thought you'd be able to do nothing with this guy. You took this guy out, and immediately after that, you lost motivation. I mean, this is according to Andy. You decided to start partying, stuff like that. You lost focus that fucking fast? Okay, it's clear that you're the one with the problem then. You're the one with the problem. If you lost your fucking focus that fucking fast, knowing you'd have to fight this fucking guy for a second time, then it's you that has the problem. Not Manny and not anybody else. And because it's you that has the problem, one is left to wonder if a trainer switch is really what the doctor ordered. Is that really what you need? A trainer switch? Or is it just that you need to get yourself together? You need to get yourself in the right headspace before it even becomes about adhering to instruction, whether it's Manny Robles' instruction or somebody else's. Andy is currently petitioning for a third fight with Anthony Joshua. He posted a tweet that reads, "I got the first one, you got the second, let's run it back a third time, see what's up." Truth, I'm not against Andy getting a third fight with Anthony Joshua, as there is a historical precedence for it that Andy won the first fight in dominant fashion, and Anthony Joshua won the second fight in dominant fashion. Thus, a tiebreaker is needed, that if we're keeping everything boxing, within the realm of boxing and what parameters that dictates, it is a precedence for a third fight, though I don't know that Andy will get it, because Anthony Joshua is a unified champion, thus he has a full plate by default. When boxing resumes, in all likelihood, Joshua's going to have to take care of Pulev. If he makes it past Pulev, he's looking to fight the winner of Wilder versus Fury 3.
Undisputed.
After that, he's got to probably deal with the winner of Usyk versus Chisora, the WBO mandatory. And by that time, the WBA mandatory will already be lined up and awaiting a title shot. Andy Ruiz doesn't fit into that picture. Unless he can climb up the rank standings and go through the proper channels, become a mandatory challenger for one of those belts that Anthony Joshua is holding, I don't see where Anthony Joshua would have the time to give Andy Ruiz another opportunity. There are those out there that feel that Andy Ruiz doesn't deserve it.
What?
I understand those people, I do. I understand those people because Andy Ruiz, at least by his own admission, squandered the second opportunity against Anthony Joshua. That you're the one that came up here and said that you didn't even bother to train for this thing, okay? You're the one that said that. And based on that,
Fuck off.
there are people out there that don't want to see no more of you. That you're not going to perform. You're not going to take the fight seriously because you didn't take the second fight seriously. So why should you get the opportunity for a third? I understand these people.
I do.
I understand them. I'm not against the third fight. I'm not against the rubber match. But I can understand where those individuals are coming from who are of the opinion that Andy blew his second shot. So he doesn't actually deserve a third. He was lucky to get the first. Happenstance, a fortuitous occurrence. Andy made the most of it the first time and he blew it the second. Thus, why should he get a third? I understand that train of thought. However, regardless of what I think and regardless of what you think, it's up to Andy to get himself in a pole position to get another crack at Anthony Joshua. It's up to him. It's not up to me or you. We're not the ones that are going to make that decision for Andy. We don't decide what happens there. Andy Ruiz decides where he goes from here, what trainer he decides to hire, what weak areas he decides to work on so that he'll have something to bring to the table to an Anthony Joshua rubber match. In truth, it's possible that if Andy gets the right people in his corner, focuses up, starts working on things, he's got enough time that he could, in theory, get another shot at Anthony Joshua. Whether or not he does, that has yet to be determined. In other heavyweight news, Whyte had this to say. He says, Brazeale is shameful, a pathetic excuse for a heavyweight boxer. He was quoted as saying, I accepted the fight that was ordered by the WBC and he pulled out of the fight. So there's nothing more to be said on that front. These guys are time wasters. Clearly he's bored at home and trying to shake off his last knockout and thinking, how can I get another big payday? The guy is a chump. How can he have 2 world title fights?
2 of them.
And he didn't even deserve one of them. That's the reason he gets 2 world title fights. Because he's easy work. Easy money. He hasn't had a single fight since his embarrassing first round knockout loss to that fraud Wilder. A man who humiliated him both inside and outside the ring. Shameful, pathetic excuse for a heavyweight boxer who should make a comeback and beat a few credible fighters before calling me out. Whyte is slated for a return on July 14th in Manchester against Olympic gold medal winner and former WBA champion, regular champion, not super, Alexander Povetkin, an Olympic gold medalist, a former world champion, said Whyte. Only lost to Klitschko and Joshua. He's a tough guy. And the one thing about Povetkin, he's technically good. He's very experienced and copes with the ups and downs in fights. I'm focused on him, and I'll give him all the respect he has earned. That's why I'm out here in camp training. Whyte is likely addressing the expressed desire from Dominic Brazeale to lock horns with him. And Whyte's reaction to that expressed desire is everything I told you guys it would be. That right now, Whyte ain't got no fucking time for no fucking Dominic Brazeale. What would he gain out of fighting Dominic Brazeale? I mean, it's not even a credible scalp at this point. At this point, the scalp of an Alexander Povetkin, given everything he's done as a professional and an amateur, the fact he's still ranked as a top 10 fighter here today, that's a far better fight, far more intriguing, and a far more credible opponent than the likes of a Dominic Brazeale.
Of course it is.
I mean, in that way, you can't accuse Whyte of taking the path of least resistance when he's willfully fighting Povetkin, a top 10 guy, a dangerous guy, a more formidable guy than Dominic Brazeale at a time when he could easily decide to give Brazeale an opportunity.
He could.
Since Brazeale wants one. That if Whyte were in the business of easy fights and gimme fights, he'd take on Brazeale, as the Brazeale fight is a much easier fight than the Alexander Povetkin fight. But Whyte stays in character. This is a guy who doesn't shy away from a challenge, doesn't shy away from anyone. He'd rather deal with Povetkin than give Brazeale that opportunity because Brazeale is easy work, and let's be honest, he doesn't deserve it. The guy hasn't had a fight since Wilder knocked him out. So where do you get that you should get a payday from Whyte? Where do you get that you should get an interim title shot against Whyte? You haven't done anything since Wilder knocked you out. If you're noticing that there seems to be a surgence of PBC fighters that want opportunities with Matchroom fighters, that Brazeale wants an opportunity with Dillian Whyte. Both Charles Martin and Andy Ruiz, they want rematches with Anthony Joshua. If you're seeing this, it is as a direct result of what's going on in a PBC stable of heavyweights. That these guys, with Wilder being toppled, ultimately preoccupied with a third Fury installment, with all of that going on, these guys got no choice but to look elsewhere for paydays, because none of them have been built up to where they can get paydays of their own, staging their own events as headliners, since none of them are headliners. I mean, you got Luis Ortiz over there, right?
Right.
You're always hearing about how great that fucking guy is. So they ought to be looking at that guy, that if this guy really were the second best heavyweight in the division, if he were everything that people make him out to be, they would be looking to him to have some kind of an interesting situation, but that's what it is. Luis Ortiz, he's not that interesting. His claim to fame is losing to Deontay Wilder 2 times. Outside of that, what the fuck has he done?
Nothing.
It's not that the PBC don't got fighters in a heavyweight division. They got fighters. They got Andy Ruiz. They got Dominic Brazeale. They got Charles Martin. They got Adam Kovnowski,
Areola.
They got Luis Ortiz. They got Efe Ajagba. They got Frank Sanchez.
Got fighters.
They got fighters, and they got fights that they can make.
They do.
None of those fights with none of those fighters are gonna get any one of those fighters the payday that a Dillian Whyte could get them. A guy who's not even a world champion. He's not a full-fledged world champion. He's not a full-fledged titleist. But that's your best bet to get a payday, because what Al Heyman has going on for you ain't a heck of a lot. You're always hearing about the genius of Al Heyman.
Fuck off.
He's so much of a fucking genius that he had it all riding on one guy.
Just one.
Wilder.
Ha!
And whatever Wilder had going for him wasn't so much about Wilder so much as it was about Anthony Joshua. Because Wilder's been around for a long fucking time, but it doesn't seem like people paid any attention to him until Anthony Joshua started shaking things up. And there was a expressed desire from the people on the ground, the fans, to see those two heavyweights lock horns.
Helped him.
Starting to get the impression that Al Heyman ain't the genius that everybody makes him out to be, though he must have some kind of skill, as he managed to get Fox to invest in his PBC after the PBC squandered millions of investors' money. So that does take some kind of skill. Don't really know what Al is going to do in this situation, it being that if he attempts to keep everything in-house the way that he does, his island policy, those fights between those fighters won't get but so much attention and so much money for the participants. Their best bet to get sizable paydays really do rest with other fighters that are on other sides of the street. But if those fighters cross over to the other sides of other streets, well, that will come at the cost of the PBC's programming on Fox, on Showtime. I don't know how that's going to sit with those networks, as they have invested in the PBC's programming, the PBC's content. So how are they going to feel when they're watching that content walk over to some other platform for a payday? It's going to be a very curious set of weeks and months after boxing resumes, once we come out of this global pandemic.